Adrien with us this week, and almost veteran now, Aurora St. James. Ladies, it's good to have you here. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have actually 4 releases this week. Maeve and Maggie are unable to be with us this week. We'll catch up with them another time, but they both have releases. Maeve Grayson had delighting her Highland Devil. That's a title, you know. That's a delightful title, which is book 7 in the Time to Love a Highlander series. So if you've been reading that series and following along, this is a good time to grab your copy of that one. And then Maggie Anderson has book 2 in the Improper Lord series came out, and it's The Marquess Takes a Misstep. And misstep has 2 S's, in case you were wondering, because I misspell it every single time. But that one looks great too. And I love the idea of improper lords. That's such a fun setup for a series. But we'll catch up with those later. I'll make sure I put the links to the book, so if you haven't gotten them yet, you can grab them while we're chatting, and we'll talk to Maggie and Maeve another time then. But this week we've got Aurora St. James with us, and you've got your second book in the Taken by Destiny series, and it's tempting the reluctant Earl. That's a good
Reclusive, but yeah.
Reclusive.
That's
Which
okay.
I guess is reluctant too, but reclusive.
I know, he definitely is.
Can you tell us a little bit about that one?
Sure. So this one features my hero, Christian Huntington, who was actually one of the secondary characters from the first book in this series. And what I love about him is he's not your typical hero. He's a genius. He is an inventor, and he is very shy. And he has a very hard time talking to people, especially because as being as smart as he is, he never really related to the average person. And so going to London for the season is his worst nightmare. And his friend Gabriel from the first book does what friends do and drags him everywhere that he needs to be, whether he likes it or not. And so this is a time travel regency, and Christian is actually the inventor of the time travel device.
Oh, cool.
And so it's a trilogy. So this is the second book, and it follows 2 sisters and a brother. And so this features the youngest sister, who is looking for her middle sister, who disappeared and accidentally triggers the same device and ends up 200 years in Regency England. And so at the start of the story, Christian he's just found out that his steward has stolen from him almost 80,000 pounds.
Oh, that's
And
quite a lot.
yeah, it's almost his full year's wages. And so right now he's in fear of losing employment. He can't pay his people, with that kind of amount of money gone from his accounts. And so he doesn't really know what to do at this point. And so he's gone to Gabriel to see what Gabriel can do to assist him in not only locating the man who's stolen all this money to try and get it back, but do some short-term investments to have enough money to be able to keep his people employed. And he finds Bellamy, who is the youngest sister, on Gabriel's doorstep, having no idea what is going on. And Christian, being as shy as he is, actually has that conflicting moment of, do I even talk to her? Should I just leave her alone? Maybe I should just walk away. But he's an honorable man, and so he's like, okay, you can do this. You can talk to her. And in that first conversation, learns that she's the sister of Gabriel's wife. And so Bellamy is a world famous fashion model. And so she is very used to dealing with all sorts of society, and she's done hundreds of parties with high profile people. And so going through the London season, she's in her element, even though she's 200 years in the past. And she's decided that Christian needs to help her get home, and he doesn't want anything to do with her. And so she's going to be the instigator in nearly every part of their relationship to literally drag him forward and make him not only find the time travel device gets stolen, but find that and interact with society and eventually come into a romantic relationship with her. She's the instigator on the entire part of that and really helps him become at least a little more sociable, whether he likes it or not. And he doesn't.
I love the idea of her being comfortable even though she's out of time, because
Hmm.
she's in her element even though she's out of time. I love that idea. That's such
Yeah.
an interesting twist.
And I really liked the idea of the woman being the pursuer of the relationship, you know?
Yeah.
Especially in a Regency romance where that doesn't always happen. So
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, great. Well, that sounds like so much fun. And then we have one more in that series.
we do. Their older brother Archer. I'm finishing the book now. I'm hoping.
Archer.
I hope the book should be out by the end of the year. But he's a Navy SEAL who's going to be transported into the past. And the first thing he ever said to me was that Special Forces did not prepare him for Regency England. So he's going to be out of his element, but he's the kind of man who is more used to being out of his element and adapting. And so it's been a fun story.
Oh, cool. Cool. We don't have a release date for that one yet, I don't believe.
Not yet. No. So
We will look forward to that one too. Awesome.
thank you.
Awesome. And then the other release that we have this week is Sarah Adrien's first Dragonblade book, and it's Don't Wake a Sleeping Lion, which is just a good idea in general. And it's a Lion's Den book. Sarah, can you tell us about this one?
Of course, I'm so happy to do that. So, they shouldn't have woken the sleeping lion, but they did, as you can imagine, right in the beginning of the book. So, our hero is Alfred. He is a Jewish doctor with the dream to establish his practice on the famous Harley Street in London, which back then wasn't quite as famous yet, but it was up and coming, so he knew he wanted to be there. And he couldn't afford it. So in comes Mrs. Dovelion, who can help him to gamble for the down payment that he needs. He wants number 91 Harley Street, and I've actually been there. I know what these buildings look like,
Oh,
and
that's so cool.
yeah, not as a patient. I was there as it's a really famous street. I was there on internships as a student, and he has a very hard time focusing on getting the money that he wants for two reasons. Number one, he cannot bill his patients. After he helps them, he just feels bad. So there's a scene where he's helping a little boy, and then the mother is happy that the boy is better. And he's like, what kind of a guy would I be if I now say, okay, so that's like 12 shillings. So he can't get paid for the work he does. He runs into debt even with his friend, who's the apothecary across the street. And the other reason why he really can't focus is because Mrs. Dovelion has a puffer, which means that there is a very beautiful girl and she gets to play with house money and keep a part of that. So her job really is to get money from the gamblers who are there for the Lion's Den. That's another conflict because, of course, she's trying to get his money, but she gets his heart instead. So,
That's a better deal.
yeah. From her point of view, her name is Ada. She was unfortunately orphaned too young, and she came from Europe. English is her second language, but she won't let anyone know. She's very smart, and she can trick anyone. The only person she can't trick is herself once she falls in love with Alfred. So there's also a fun twist about this. Alfred has a brother. He lives with his brother in town, and his brother has to pretend to be Alfred in the short story that's going in the anthology, The Night of Lions.
Mhm.
So they're crossing paths, and of course they're all annoying Mrs. Dovelion terribly because these Jewish boys, they're like, you think a matchmaker is new to us? We've been evading them for years. Like, do you know our mother? So that's really fun.
No, it sounds like
Do you know our mother?
Well, that sounds like so much fun. And so you've got another book coming in the Lion's Den anthology, and then another entire series as well.
Yes, I do. So they're all doctors. on Harley Street, and um, the stories that are as part of the Lion's Den series are at number one Harley Street. They want to establish a clinic, so they need a lot of more money for that. So really, gambling is one quick and easy way to try to get that, and of course, they lose their hearts on the way. The other series is called Miracles on Harley Street. Those are longer novels. They are all taking place at 87 Harley Street, and there are think about a combination of Regency romance, kind of Grey's Anatomy. So they're
Oh,
all,
fun.
it's like that. So I'm trying to bring in a lot. There's a lot of research going into this for how medicine worked in those times. What are the limitations? And of course, these are novels that people want to read to enjoy and relax, so I can't make them too gruesome. And there are huge challenges for these young people to establish themselves, and they came with training from around the world. Some of them are Jewish, some of them are not. And there's also the little sister from the eye surgeon, and she's not so little anymore, and she falls for a royal, and that's a terrible combination because she's a nurse and he really can't, and it's just they shouldn't, but they do. Yeah, kind of a story.
Those are the best ones when they shouldn't, but they do.
Yeah, yeah.
Definitely.
And they have what I really like about writing this is that they're close friends to me now. And I feel like I just got to introduce them because they come in and out of each other's stories. The next one that's almost finished now for the Lion's Den series is a doctor who Alfred from this first book now grew up with. They know each other so well. They kind of fell out of touch because they traveled the world. The one for the second one, his name is Phil, and he had to go to India to learn, kind of hypnosis without using the word in the book because there was no anesthesia at the time. And then Alfred isn't home. He's doing a house call when his beloved Ada goes into labor with, of course, they didn't have ultrasound, so nobody knew they were twins. So that's a whole big deal. That book was called The Lion's First Choice because something from Mrs. Dovelion's past throws a curveball for the doctor in this story. And he falls in love with a nurse.
Very cool. And we get twins, so
I mean, can you imagine? So he comes and he saves Ada's life from this book in the next one. So the friendships get closer and closer as we move through the stories.
I love that when we get to see the characters we've fallen in love with over and over again, and we get to watch them as they're living out their happily ever after too, especially. So
Yeah.
in Aurora's book, you've got the younger sister that shows up on the doorstep, so we're going to get to see the older sister from the first book in this book as well, I'm assuming.
Absolutely. And also the heroine from book 3 is the younger sister of Gabriel, the hero from book 1. And so they have a very unique relationship where they banter all the time, and they're so much fun on the page. I just love them. So it's fun to be able to see those characters' relationship again, from book 1 all the way through book 3. So that's been a lot of fun. And actually, I also have a short story in the anthology, the Lions anthology coming up. So, and that features Owen, one of the side characters, who's also in books 1 and 2. So hopefully if people enjoy the series, they will also go and read his story. So
very cool. And that anthology is it's a handful of books for 99 cents. So there's absolutely no reason not to.
I think they're going to be great.
Yeah. And we're going to do Dragonblade will do a release party and a whole big to do, so you won't miss the release for that one. We'll be sure to make sure everybody knows about it before it comes. So.
I can't wait for that.
Yeah, and the cover for that one is just so beautiful. This eyes.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
I know. Every once in a while, we get covers that'll come through the pipeline, and they pop up in teams, and it's like, oh my! And that was one of those because his eyes are just it's just so much. So, yeah, all kinds of things to look forward to. Awesome. So I thought we could maybe take the time that we have left and talk about So my favorite topic is to talk to authors about how you started to read romance, like how you were introduced to the genre, and then also how you started to write. And one of the reasons I do it is purely selfish because when you talk about the way you started to read, everybody talks about their favorite books, and then I get to be reminded of ones that I loved and also, find ones I didn't
Totally.
recognize. So could we talk a little bit about how you maybe your first memories of starting to read, and then how you went on to read romance as a genre?
Am I
Who's
starting with Aurora?
That'd be great. Go ahead, Sarah.
Okay. So I had two starts. One of them was I learned English when I was 5. I started learning English, so I had to read a lot. And I quickly fell
What's your
in
native language?
German. So I quickly fell into Jane Austen.
Oh,
It land very quickly. It was a lot of vocabulary. It was almost like an exercise in grammar and getting through the sentences at the time. So then I found Shopaholic, and that was much easier to read. And I think I read all the Shopaholic books in one summer, and they
oh,
were
fun.
laugh out loud for me at the time. It was just right, exactly. Um,
Mhm.
that was perfect for me, and not then. So then I made my grandmother read them because she was learning English too. So I actually read all the Shopaholics with my grandma, and she had read, you know, all the classics before. And when I went to college, I was an English major and I focused on Jewish fiction. I would have never thought that I would end up writing sort of something like that. I just did. There was nothing further from my mind. Um, I went to law school and I did learn to write a lot really fast and to organize what I write. So my mom asks me every day, "Are you using anything from law school?" Like, oh yes, I am. So, um,
not what you think, but yes.
yeah. Although I have one story in the back of my mind, I'm saving that for a very special character that's going to be a Regency era courtroom drama. Like the
Oh,
I'm
fun.
saving that. I love him so much. I can't quite let him out yet. And he's still someone's little brother right now, so he has to grow up a bit. But there's going to be this like Ally McBeal Regency version of
Oh,
it.
fun.
That's fun.
So that's coming sometime. And that's how I got into. I can write a lot really fast. I can organize myself. And I love the smart heroines who get to have a heart.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you you can't lose it along the way. I like the ones who have a moral compass. I like the ones who have values, which is what really got me into the Regency era, because it just it's just different these days. Values and politics and ethics um, just have a different kind of Venn diagram these days.
Yeah.
And if you put it in an 18th, 19th century context, it's a lot easier to talk about it.
Oh, fun. Fun. And so you read a great deal of historical and then started writing historical as well. Has
Yeah.
there have you ever wanted to write it in a different time period, or is Regency it for you?
So I have various legal textbooks out. um, so I have plenty of those. The ones that I joke about is like that if you don't have at least 5 footnotes on a page, you're not finished. So that's true. That's true. Um, and I have 2 books written that are contemporary romance, but I haven't. I have. They're not. I don't know. Like they're finished, but I can't get them out. I don't know why. I can't really explain it. So I love, love, love the Regency era. I
Mhm.
love the neighborhoods. I took various research trips and I walked the paths that my characters walk. I've
Oh,
been on the streets where
awesome.
they were.
Yeah.
And it's like time traveling. Even though
Mhm.
you go there now, what Aurora said, like just makes me think like if you go there now and you look at the chairs they sat in and you look at the walls and even if it's renovated and it's different now, that's as close as we can get.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have the characters from the different series walking in and out of each other's lives, especially with the doctors on Harley Street. Some of the other characters will meet doctors along the way. There, you always need to know where you can find a good one that you can trust.
Brilliant.
That's true. Strictly true. So, Aurora, what about you? How did you start reading, and
Um,
specifically romance?
yeah, I always read, and when I was a kid, I read a lot of like the Nancy Drew and Trixie Belden
Mhm.
mysteries, and in my head, I was always making romance for them. And then as I got a little bit older, my mom was reading almost strictly historical romance because that was hugely popular at the time. And so I read a lot of like the Joanna Lindsay and Jude Knight and Barbara Cartland books, and so I would sneak those until I figured I was old enough that I didn't have to sneak them anymore. You know what I mean? And so she wasn't really paying attention anyway. I don't think she really cared whether I was reading them or not. But I really love them, and I started basically penning my own fan fiction as to whatever I was in at the time. But it took um, until I was in my late 20s before I I got back into really writing and realized that that is what I love to do, and I felt like that was what I was best at, and so that I decided to just go for it and started writing romance at the time. And so,
Awesome.
it's been a fun journey. I
So,
really still enjoy those authors. So.
yeah, yeah, those are some of the greats. So do you plot your novels out ahead of time? I'm imagining that Sara is very organized in how she structures her novels. Do you plot your novels ahead of time, or do you just start with an idea and go?
I do plot them, and I really dig into my characters as much as I can, along with the plots. And I try and leave myself enough room for them to flourish and do what they're going to do. And in fact, in the the short story for the anthology, I had it all plotted out, and the last third of the book went absolutely not the way I wanted it to go. So it's okay though. Sometimes their ideas are much better than mine, and so that's a fun part of it. But yeah, that's what I did. I always plot them out and then just wait to see what changes they make along the way.
How did you end up doing time travel?
Actually, through author Violetta Rand, when
Oh,
she
yeah.
and I were originally talking about submitting a book to Dragonblade, she was like, at the time I was writing medieval and medieval
Mhm.
fantasy. She was like, well, I would love to see a Regency time travel series. And I thought, I can do that. I have wanted to write Regency in the past. I just never got around to doing it. And I think time travel would be a fun angle because a lot of times, when we're watching shows like Bridgerton and stuff, we think, gosh, what would it be like if we were in that time period? And so it gave me an opportunity to say, well, what would it be like if I left today and ended up there by accident? And how what kind of things would I run into? And, how much would I miss my toilet? Very much, things like that. So, anyway.
How fun. Well, that makes a lot of sense. And Sara, I'm just assuming that you plot your books. But
I do
tell me if
plot
I'm
them.
wrong.
I do. I plot. I have a system for plotting, but then, almost like what Aurora said, sometimes the characters just do something else, or they feel really strongly about something, and then that turns into a chapter, and then you have to weave it through. So I allow myself to do that too. For the story that I'm just about to finish now, The Lion's First Choice, I thought I had this plan of like how I'm trickling in the backstory. I read about how to trickle in backstory. How can I really do this well? It's like it's not like this at all because the girl Shira asks so many questions that Mrs. Doveline is annoyed. It's like, okay, you want to hear it? I'm going to tell you. So then in one chapter it was all out there, but the dialogue went really well.
Mhm.
It's like okay, so we work with that now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Isn't it great when when you're writing and you get the characters talking back and forth so quickly that you have to work to keep up with them?
Yeah,
I
I
think
do
it's
that,
wonderful
and
to
then
do
I'm so in it. Then I come like the kids or my family distract me, and I'm like, shh, shh, and it's like, or we go downstairs and we're eating lunch or so as a family, and I'm like, that's exactly what they said. Like, and my husband looks at me, he's like, are these the real people or the fake people? And then they live on, because if you're in it, you stay with them for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to have a sign on my office door that said, "Don't come in unless you're bleeding or on fire," because the kids would come in the door, and then the little ones started just coming to the door and opening the door and going, "I'm not bleeding or on fire, but." Okay. Clearly not working anymore.
I
But yeah,
know.
there is something about like being so in your head that makes it hard to interact with real life people. The
Sometimes, yes.
imaginary ones are talking so much. So
It's one of the reasons why I really, really just love working from home.
mhm.
There are some days where all I want to do is just take the whole weekend and make some cups of tea, and I sit down and I live through this book and I live through the story. And I even do it at night when everyone else is sleeping, so then I can sit and I live in those stories. I can't very well imagine that just the way I work to do this from 9 to 5. It's
Mhm.
just, I can't. There are some people who I'm sure this works for great, but it's not me. So I work in these chunks where I'm in the story, and then that's also why the other characters walk in and out. Because like they just have some new instruments. One of the doctors from across the street is going to want to see like, where did you get that?
Mhm.
Like, how did you import this stuff? So then they are not sharp enough. So then I have a series on jewelers. So the jeweler's, oh, I can sharpen the instruments for you. That's no problem. It's like, can I borrow one of these? You know. So yeah, they're very real, very dear, and very close to my heart. And every time a book comes out, it's like I'm introducing friends to the world.
Yeah. And I love learning things new. One of the reasons that I like historicals is because I learn things that I would not know otherwise. So when you all do your research really well and can tell me something that I can believe in, maybe not all the gory details of medicine and the Regency period,
No, no, I won't.
but things that I would not know otherwise. I like that part. That's like getting how to and a story at the same time. So
Yes, so there are. I'm the sort of tagline for the Miracles on Harley Street Doctor series
mhm.
is Trailblazers in Medicine in Matters of the Heart. So I'm trying to. I do have to read the gory details. I saw some pictures online that I wish I can unsee and delete. Like it's so easy when you can delete words
Mhm.
you wrote, but you
Mhm.
can't unsee certain
That
things.
image from your head. Yeah.
But what can you do? Like, what would these like really nice young doctors have done to do something better about this? So that's where I try to put the stories. So one of them, in the first book that will be in the Miracles of Harley Street series, finds just a much better way for eye surgeries. It's quick, it's clean, and it's easy. So I won't go into it. But there is a recovery period for the Earl who unfortunately needs this, but without it, he wouldn't be seeing. So he
Mhm.
has to suffer for 2 or 3 days at home. And of course, madness erupts during that because it's so inconvenient. And um, I don't go into the very bad details, but I just go into before and after this
Mhm.
miracle happened, what could be there. That's
Yeah.
a balancing act that I'm hoping the editors will help me with also.
Yeah.
I can see that part.
I learned a lot about laudanum and how bad the addiction was to it when writing this series. Because in the first book, Gabriel's mother is addicted to laudanum, and I mean, it was something that the doctors gave everybody for everything.
Mhm.
And so, but because it's opium, basically, there was a lot more addiction than is generally talked about. And so that was an interesting thing that I learned about.
Yeah. So do you find that do you have a special way that you like to go about researching your books? Do you do the research ahead of time? Do you let yourself slide down rabbit holes as you're writing, or do you have to set boundaries so that you don't spend all day reading about eye surgery and the Regency or laudanum use, so you can actually get your words done?
I spend a lot of time in rabbit holes. I don't research much in advance because by the time I get there, things will have probably changed anyhow.
Mhm.
But I am trying to limit my rabbit hole time. So, work in progress on that.
If you find an effective way to do that, if you could post it in the author loop, that would be great.
Yeah, I know, like we all need that, right?
Because I think what part of it is the lure of that learning something new, that and rediscovering things, and then you can picture your characters in places that you wouldn't picture them before, and it's like that's seductive. So
And the next thing you know, you have a whole new series in mind.
That happens.
we don't see that as a difficulty on our end.
Right.
That was just fine for us.
True.
I love these kinds of rabbit holes, though. I have to tell you, I'm totally guilty of the same thing, because in legal research, you can't do that. You have to just move on and maybe support something someone else said, and then you have to dig and dig and dig. Like then you find it's like, all right, so now I feel like I've done 5 hours of work and I really haven't accomplished very much. But here, if I do it, it's like I've really just built a whole backstory, or I've just drawn myself a map or something like that, and it's just you can use your creativity and your imagination, and you can let it travel with you. I love that. It also makes family vacations a little more educational, because I force my family on research trips. So there. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I force my family on high tea, afternoon tea kind of
That
research trip.
doesn't feel very much of a force, like I would be happy to. I'd be happy to do a high tea.
Yes,
My
I've had
kids, though, might be like, no, Mom, this is boring.
my kids love it because it's so many desserts. So they get all these
Mhm.
cute little desserts that are pretty. And these days, actually, most places have a kids' afternoon tea, which is hot chocolate, which I was thinking of for Mrs. Dovelion is perfect because she prefers hot chocolate to tea.
Mhm.
So I took my kids to a castle, and they had different kinds of teapots, coffee pots, and hot chocolate pots. And I'm not going to go into the gruesome parts of how the hot cocoa got there at the time, because that's not so nice. But the fact that there were all these different kinds of cups and pots, and I ended up giving this whole lecture to my son, and I was like, well, this is used for this, and this is used for this, and it said like 1817, which is like just perfect timing. And then they had these little golden spoons, and I was like, this has holes in it because you want it to drain, and like I go into all this. Then there was a whole group of people around us, like, she's done a lot of research on the teapots. And I was like, oh, this is like my kiddie version of this. Like, I'm just started.
Well, we're gonna have to plan another time to talk about chocolate pots and coffee pots and teapots, because I think we could go much longer with that. But we have run out of time, ladies. It was a delight to talk to you this week. I really appreciate you taking the time, and it was lovely to meet you, Sara.
Thank you.
Aurorra, thank you for being our veteran this time. I'm going to put the links to all the books in the comments. So if you haven't gotten them yet, you can grab them right away. Dragonblade books are their very best deal, pre-order and release. So you're going to get them as soon as you can. And if you don't manage to snag it right away, you can always read it for free in Kindle Unlimited. That is an always thing. And it means that you can, if anything tickles your imagination, or you get a little bit caught by something, you can grab it and try it and find out for yourself. So, ladies, thanks again for taking the time to talk. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. So nice to meet you, Aurorra. I love your books.
And you too, Sara.
Thank you.
We'll be back next week at the same time. Thanks.